Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today we have Cheli Cerra, who is a parent strategist, child success expert, author, coach, and school principal. She works with busy moms to strategize social, emotional, and academic wellness for their friends. She's been featured as a guest expert on Fox News and is also the founder of eduville.com. So let's give a warm welcome to Cheli. So Cheli, welcome.
Hi, Byron. It's great to be here this morning with you.
Oh, great. So how did you get into this? As it's a unique line of business to be able to help parents with their children.
Well, it started a while ago when I saw the need to help parents with navigating the school system and when the school choice movement started coming about. So I decided to write a book just to give information because I love giving people information. And that one book turned into 6. It's a series. And after that, I just continued helping parents and then became a coach and just continued to help because there's so much need today in the educational world for parents to understand their choices, for parents to understand even if your kid is making straight A's or social and academic and emotional aspects that need to be considered. So I just love to educate and teach, and this is how I'm doing it on a different platform.
Okay, that's great. But here's a question for you. When I listened to this, I'm thinking, what is happening in today's, with children in the school system that we have to go above and beyond? Because I'm thinking, years ago, it just seemed like the only thing that was there is kids would go to school, they go to the after-school programs and so forth, and then they continue about their day. But it seems like there's so much more that's taking place now.
Yes, there is. Our world has changed. And as you know, there's live streaming, there's podcasting, we're all online. And there's nothing wrong with you sending your child to the neighborhood school. That's great, and you're on top of your kid's education. But so many parents are entrepreneurs. They work, they travel a lot. And parents need to understand the different choices for their kids, not only for their lifestyle fit, but also for their child's learning style fit. These are two different things. And today, Byron, there are so many different school choices available for parents. When you and I went to school, it was basically, one size. But today there's numerous different choices.
Now, what type of choices are available today that were not around in the past?
Well, the homeschool movement is really big right now, and that's a choice. But the other two choices that weren't around are the charter schools and also the virtual schools. And you can also do like a mix and match, and it's really cool how you can work on all the different choices that you have. But I would say the big one would be a virtual school.
So how does a virtual school work? Because there's people I'm sure they've heard of all the online schools for college and such, but for children, a virtual school seems different.
Yes, it does. We have virtual schools available for kids starting in kindergarten. And there's a teacher, there's programs that go online, they do all kinds of really cool things. It's not for everybody, I just give information. I'm very open-minded about choices that parents can select for their lifestyle fit, for their child's learning fit. And I'm just a provider of information. I am a public school principal. I've been in public school for just about my entire career, but I am published. I've written books. I'm always doing research on what's the real key for learning in kids today, because our world has changed. The kids, the way that they learn today is not the way they learned 10 or 15 years ago. With all the social media, with all the interactive things going on online, our brains are changing, and our kids today, if you look at a 2-year-old, they'll take an iPad or a phone and start working on it, and it's like no big deal. When we were 2, that didn't exist. So this is something that parents need to be aware of, their choices.
Right. I like to jokingly say that, when we were kids, the closest thing we had to an iPad was an Etch-a-Sketch.
I love my Etch-a-Sketch. That was a great thing.
Oh, totally. So now, with these different choices, how does it impact with parents being able to interact with their kids? Because if a 2-year-old can start working an iPhone and the parents like, yeah, I can't even figure out how to turn it on. How do parents communicate effectively when there's this information gap?
There's a great question. To me, I'm always telling my parents that you need to listen more to your child and you need to communicate and see what they're interested in and what they're up to. Some kids really might not even be that much into social media, even if it's, around today. They might be more into sports. They might like music and art. It just depends on your child. But basically, it's important to know what your child is up to. There's some great apps out there so that you can monitor what they do on social media, which is really important. And I'm working on a little book on that right now, social media and your kid and things that you need to know. So it's really critical for parents to be on top of everything that their kids are doing.
It sounds like when you put all of this together that parents need to be more involved, because it seems like many of the problems that exist today could be minimized or reduced if there's a higher level of involvement.
Yes, and I always tell parents, don't assume. You have to be very, very careful as to where your child is going online, who your child's friends are. And it's important to know the parents of, the kids that your kid hangs out with, if they go to birthday parties, if they go to events. Stay, monitor. Just don't think that people are just like you, because we're living in a huge world and you have to be on top of what your kid is up to, what your kid is doing, how your kid is learning. Even if they're going to a great neighborhood school or a parochial or private or charter school, or if you're homeschooling, always be on top of how your child is learning, because the impact is going to be tremendous 10 and 15 years down the road. I also work with many parents who want to make sure that their kids are academically and socially moving forward. Why do I say that? Because a lot of us as adults had things happen to us as kids that impact us later in life. For example, public speaking could be one of them. If you had to stand up in front of the classroom one day and speak and the kids laughed at you, wow, how does that make you feel now when you're an adult and you have to do a mastermind, or you have to get up and do a keynote? That can impact you as an adult. So these are things that I work with parents on to make sure their kids are happy, social, academically, and emotionally sound.
That's great, because it's so important. People don't think about how those events from years ago in their childhood can still be haunting them today in some capacity.
Yes, it's huge. And think about it. Take yourself back to, I always say, okay, 5th grade is like the pinnacle year, when you're 10. That's like when you're going into middle school and, you're more aware of your world and your surroundings and, your peer groups. And that's when things start happening. And middle school basically is a laboratory of getting you ready for the world out there. It kind of solidifies your personality traits. It solidifies your leadership skills. And, as parents, we need to work with our children, especially more during that age group, to give them those skills that they might be lacking, or even emphasizing the great gifts that they have so that they can be successful in life as an adult.
And you're so right there, of all those formative years where you think about the difference it makes if you have the right influence versus not having it at all, and where it leads people to in life.
Yes, it does. And having mentors in your life, and mentors could be your grandparents, your aunts or uncles. It could be another family. It could be your mom and dad. And, I talk a lot about mentors because it's important, especially as your child starts getting older, middle and high. It's important to maybe involve mentors in the careers that they are wanting to go into, so that they're aware of what needs to be done in terms of, college, in terms of internships. We're living in a very competitive world today, a world that is getting smaller because we are universal. So everything that we can give our children to give them that extra edge, community service projects, maybe internship projects, maybe speaking to the right person that'll give them a tip or an idea to get them to that next level, is so important. And it's critical in today's educational world.
Right. Oh, definitely. And one of the things that I think about, because, you hear the discussion taking place with schools of some being good, some being bad. What should parents be doing if, let's say, they're in a place where they realize the education system is not the best available?
Well, they need to take action right away. Their first line is talking to the teacher. And I have a whole series with questions that parents can ask the teacher kind of to see where the red flags are. So you talk to the teacher, you see how the teacher communicates. Then your next line is, the counselor or goes straight to the principal. Say to the principal, look, this is what's going on. How can you guys help me? I need help with my child. And last resort is you start finding another school for your child. You start looking. You start seeing what's best for your kid. Because if you wait and if you wait and if you wait, sometimes it's too late. So it just depends what area you're living in, what are your goals for your child. Parents have to be involved. You just can't take things for granted. You have to be involved.
Right, and involvement is so critical. But then what about the people that they can't necessarily afford private schooling and they're in an educational system where it's not rated the highest within a school district? What are the options available to somebody at that point?
All right. Well, at that point, they need to go and see what choices they have within their school district. Let's say that they go into a public school system. Schools allow you to do transfers, to do hardship transfers, to do school choice transfers. So you have to do your homework and you have to say, okay, this is my school district. You go to the central district office or you go to the office where the transfer process takes place, and you go and you sit down and you have a meeting and you explain to them exactly why you want another school choice. And 9 times out of 10, they'll listen to you and they'll give it to you. They'll give you those options. I help parents navigate those processes because it can be a little, difficult, but it can be done. And you can also go to a charter school. A charter school is another form of public education. So it doesn't cost parents anything, but it just depends what area you are in if charter schools are available. But I would say to parents, go to that office, sit down, ask for a transfer, do your homework, do your research, see what schools are around that would be a good fit for your child. And
that in itself, I think, is fascinating because it's often not talked about that you can be able to take your child's education in your own hands and then do something about it instead of saying, well, this is all there is, so you're just going to have to suck it up.
Right. No, exactly. And that's why I started writing my book series, because there's so much information that parents need to know. And the education system can be, it can be a scary place to navigate if you don't know the ins and outs of it. It's very scary because, face it, you're going into an arena, you don't know the education language, you don't know the laws. But I always tell parents, go and Google, type it in. Hey, I need help for my child. I live in this school district. What are my options? And it'll pop up. But there are choices. Parents always have choices.
That's great to know because I think it's something that people need to know more about. That often there's misinformation, unfortunately.
There's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of no information. And like when I work with my parents, I'm like, okay, so you heard this from your friend, but that's not, a lot of times people create all these things because of fear or because misinformation or because they don't know. So I like to get down to the brass tacks and say, look, this is the situation, this is a problem, and this is how your choices to resolve it. I always give parents choices because I don't make the choice for them. It's like going to a buffet. Some people might like chicken, some people might like fish, some people might like meat. So here it is. What's the best fit for your child? Because you have to take your child's skills, talents, and abilities in check as well. You're not going to put your child in a language school if your child doesn't like an academically rigorous language. What if your child's an artist? Then we need to try and find a school that will support your child's talents. And there are many. And this world is full of great schools. Public education is still great. They have a lot of options, but parents have to be the savvy consumer in finding the right fit for their kid.
And exactly it. Now, here's the question I have for you because of that. If students, they'll have the different aptitude for art, science, and so forth. What's the best way of beginning to match them up if, let's say, a child has interest in multiple areas, but schools are more focused on one than the other?
Well, you have to sit and basically talk to your child, depending on the age that your child is. You have to see and look at the different programs that are available. Maybe one is stronger than the other. And then at the end of the day, you have to see where you want your child to end up. Do you want your child to go to a performing college? Do you want, what kind of track, college prep? What is it that you know your child will really be good at and your child is really passionate about? That's how parents have to figure this out. Another thing that I tell parents is that it's very important to keep our boundaries, because sometimes we have unfulfilled expectations and we want our kids to kind of finish what we never got to do. And maybe your child doesn't want to be the next, recording artist. Maybe your child wants to be, a math genius and become a math professor. So we have to make sure that our kids are aligned with what their gift, talents, and abilities are, and that we keep our boundaries in check by not having our kids do something that maybe we didn't finish doing in high school.
That's something I've heard on multiple of occasions, because you think about the parents out there that they have this desire to relive, the quote-unquote glory days, and they unfortunately do it through their child.
Yes, they live vicariously through their kids. And, a lot of kids just go along for the ride, and because they want to make mommy and daddy happy. And then what happens is they end up in college, they end up in a career, a vocation that they're not really happy about. And then at the age of 30, it hits them. Oh my goodness. They drop out of like med school, or they drop out of their law practice because they're not happy.
Right.
And it's important for parents to understand that. It's important to have an open mind as a parent, and to understand that our child is not an extension of who we are, but your child is their own individual with their own personality, their own likes and dislikes. And even though we are there to guide them, they're little people. They're their own person, and we have to honor that.
Oh, definitely. And it's something that is often overlooked as parents because they want the best, but there's not that two-way communication. They just think that you're going to do this and you're going to like it, even though it's not the best fit, like you were saying with med school or law. And unfortunately, they push that child all the way down that path and then realize later, oh, I just want to paint pictures, and they're not happy.
Exactly. And of course, we're going to guide our children. That's our job as parents, to bring them the best opportunities that we can afford them, rich experiences. And it doesn't take a lot of money to do this either. You can go online, you can have all kinds of great conversations. But here's the thing, that as you're guiding them, you need to listen to them, because maybe the road that you're guiding them down might not be the road that they want to go on.
Right. And that's something people have to keep in mind, is ensuring that with that communication that it's the right path, so they end up as the best version of themselves instead of just a fraction of it because they're doing something they're not passionate about.
No, exactly. And I work with a lot of busy moms because we're all busy, especially entrepreneurial moms, and a lot of them have home-based businesses. And it's like, well, when do I find time? Well, you make time in your schedule. You find time, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming, because today the world is going by so fast. So there's tips that I give to parents as to how they're going to have these great conversations. And, and it's fun. Life should be fun. Working with your kid and helping them, grow as an individual should be a fun and enriching experience. That's why you had a kid, because, it's just special.
Right. So what are some of the ways that people can start having great conversations with their kids? Because I think for some, they just don't know how to communicate effectively. Exactly.
I would throw out some question starters, and not like, how was your day? But say, hey, tell me the one thing that you learned today that was really cool. Something like that. And then listen to your child. Or, if you could do something differently, what would it do? And what would that different thing be? Just kind of, I have conversation starters for parents, throw it out there, ask them, listen, shake it up. When you're in the car driving is a great time to have conversations. That's a really good time. Turn off the radio, have a conversation, and take turns if you have more than one child. Make it a game. All right, you guys, I'm going to ask questions, and we're going to, do round robin and listen to what everybody has to say. Another great thing to do is, if you have more than one child, is you set up like a special dinner date with your kid. and you set aside time or even lunch, and you take your child somewhere. It could be a picnic. You don't have to spend money. And, you make it special, and you listen to your child and you talk. You take your child somewhere that your child is really into. It could be a museum. It could be wherever. And you take that time and listen to your child. And you get to know your child more as an individual.
Oh, no, that's great, because I think people forget about that one-on-one interaction. It's always one to many, and there's not that special bond that ever forms because of it. Exactly,
because we're all so busy. We're all creating our careers. We're all trying to, live in this social media world that we live in. And it's important. Another thing that I tell parents, it's really important, and sometimes it's not possible doing it on a daily basis, but the old-fashioned dinners around the dinner table is so important. And you turn your phones off. No phones at the table. You sit and you have a conversation. Hey, tell me, what is the book that you're reading today in school that you really like? Or, what book what did you do in school today that really turned you off, that you didn't like? Let me listen to that. So conversations are so important. And we're having less and less of them because everybody's texting. That's why turn your phone off, like it's a no phone zone. The dinner table should be a no phone zone.
Right. I think that's something people can apply almost anywhere, as it drives me nuts if you're having a conversation, you're at dinner with people, and they're just constantly on their phones like, I'm right here, there's nothing else that should be more important right now.
Exactly. Especially your child. You should make your child feel that they're the most important person on this world. And especially at dinner, especially when you're going to sit with them to do homework. Or, of course, emergencies are going to come up, but not, don't multitask when it comes to your kids. Spend the time. And it's not time, it's the quality time that you spend with your child. 30 minutes could be monumental if you're in those 30 minutes focusing on your child 100%.
Right. And I think people have to just remember that every little bit of time adds up, that if you're spending that quality time, even if it's 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, it's making a substantial difference, because you never know that one conversation of how it can continuously keep them on a particular track in life.
Exactly. Or when you're preparing dinner or setting the table, have them help you. Chores are important. Kids should do chores because it's part of their development and involvement into the world of as you're grooming them to be an adult. So it's so important to interact and engage and have fun as you're doing this. Have fun.
Oh, definitely. If you're not having fun, you would never want to do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And your kid wants to, you have to laugh with your children. You have to have, even though, listen, we're all busy. I was a busy mom. I raised my kids, but it's important to have fun with them and plan really fun things and fun activities, at least on the weekends or once a week, just so that you disconnect and you get to know them as people.
Oh, I think that's something that's often just not done, because you think of people are in that constant grind and they forget about just doing fun things to spend time together, instead of it just being, we're going to sign you up for 10 different extracurricular activities and you're going to like all of them.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Byron, because today there's a huge movement out there for free play. And I'm a proponent of free play. What does that mean? Just unorganized, good old-fashioned, go outside, run around and play. Because you're right, a lot of us overschedule our children. We want them in karate, we want them in soccer, music lessons, voice lessons, drama, you name it. And your kid is so overscheduled, their social calendar is more filled up than yours. And it's just important to say, you know what, no TV. I mean, I really believe that TV should be very controlled, or social media should be very controlled with children. Because it's very important for them to go out and just have fun and play and be creative. Just think.
Right. I think it's something that people forget about, that it's this detached parenting where people think, well, just go watch TV, I'm busy, instead of interacting, because you look at how that becomes a cascading problem.
Well, you have to watch what they're watching on TV also, because even some shows for kids can be very violent, and they can be very, it just depends on what you want for your your child, but you have to monitor everything that your kid does, who they play with when they're outside. You have to watch your children. We live in a huge world today that you just have to be careful and cognizant. But I really am into free play. I'm into drawing. Give a blank piece of paper with crayons and just draw. Let that imagination go wild. Let's kind of see what comes out, what's in your brain. We need to incite that in our kids today. Creativity is so important. And, it's one of the cornerstones of creative thinking, imagination, and of higher order skills. And it's very important to allow our children to have some of this free time to do it.
Oh, definitely. And it's just something that people have to allow to happen, that imagination, because while some people might think like, oh, that just seems childish of the kid's imagination who's running wild. But then if you look at some of the great accomplishments, the result of because someone allowed that person to have this wild imagination as a child so they can begin thinking about things that people would never think about.
You're right. Just imagination and free play and just thinking incites creativity, and incites, who knows, your child could be the next genius in creating something outstanding when they were running around outside and just imagining, and then they put that imagination into action as they get older. You never know. But you have to allow the brain, and today we are so bombarded with so much information. We are on information overload. So it's important to teach our children also to kind of shut their brain off and just relax and just be. That's why there's such a huge mindfulness movement right now, because everybody's so stressed out. If we just disconnected and just sat in stillness, it's just wonderful. It does wonders for all of us.
And you mentioned something there I think it's important that people know about, with the amount of information overload and children easily becoming stressed out because of the pressure. How does a parent begin coping with that? Because they might be thinking, oh, come on, you can suck it up, I did it. But they need to really do more.
Well, you have to be careful, because you don't want your child to be stressed. The worst thing you can do is have a stressed out child. And when I work with parents, I make sure that, if they're having difficulty in school because maybe the teacher's giving too much homework, then we need to immediately address that, and we need to see why. And also, your child needs to have some time to just, like I said, free play. If they have structure, they go to school, they come home, they have their homework done, then they have to go to karate or soccer, and every single time is taken up. I believe in systems, and I believe in, having routines for children. It's very important. But I also believe in having a healthy balance. So parents have to gauge, and if children are getting a little too stressed because of the extracurricular, then you need to cut back a little bit and maybe leave those for the summer, put them in a summer camp that will address whatever the extracurricular was, if it was summer camp or drama camp. So wait till the summer where your child doesn't have the pressures of school. Another thing that I also tell parents is that there's different grade levels that are more challenging than others. So those grade levels, you need to be aware of it, and maybe you need to get your child extra help if they need extra help, such as a tutor. If you can't sit there and, help your children. There's a new movement around with Common Core, and the math, the way it's being taught is very different than you and I learned math. So these are all things that have to take into consideration. Parents need to know that our children today, there's a lot more expectations from them in a school than there ever was before.
So now, what are your thoughts about Common Core? Because I hear rumblings from a lot of my friends with children, and because I like to keep the podcast clean, I can never repeat what they say about Common Core.
Well, there's a huge movement always in education to go one side of the pendulum or the other. And now we are buckling down because our math and science scores in this country aren't what they should be. And a lot of our kids are getting out of high school and they have to take remedial courses in college because, again, they're not meeting the standards. Common Core is going into the deeper standards of how you and I were taught. The math now is taught in a different way because it's critical thinking. It's defining not the answer, but how you got to the problem, how you worked out the problem. And there's more than one way to get to an answer. So it's all about critical thinking. It's all about digging deeper. I really am into the basics. And if parents are listening to this and they're saying, well, what can I do to help my kids today? I would say make sure your children have a very solid foundation, that they have their reading skills down, that they have their grammar down, grammar and reading, and the basic, facts, mathematical facts, adding, subtraction, division, and multiplication. A lot of our kids have trouble with multiplication. They need to know multiplication to be able to get on to do the higher math and Common Core is giving our children. But you have to have a solid foundation for your child. So that's very important, that when you set a school, you find a school for your child, or if you're homeschooling your child, that child of yours has a solid foundation. Your child should be reading by first grade. I would say January of first grade. If your child is not reading, that is a giant red flag. You need to get some help. Because after that, it's very hard to close the gap. Very hard.
And that kind of surprises me, because I just think that, from my experience when I was growing up, like reading by the first grade, oh my gosh, I was reading before even kindergarten.
Exactly. You should be reading in kindergarten, but some kids take longer, some are late bloomers. So developmentally, every child is different.
Right.
So when I work with my staff, my kids, and my parents at school, and even when I work with my own coaching clients, we wait. We wait to see, you have to have conversations with the teacher. You have to see, but at the beginning of, like I said, by January of that first grade year, if your child is still not reading, and I'm saying reading on a first grade level, then you need to take action and quick.
Right. Oh, definitely. You have to do it. So it sounds like, when coming back to the whole concept of Common Core, it's more of the conceptualization, so kids can learn that there's always more than one solution. It's not just here's the only way that you can do something. Is that correct?
Well, in mathematics, that's the way it is. That's correct. And with writing and grammar, what we give our children today is a lot of, they have to dig deeper into like compare and contrast when they're reading material. It's not, hey, what was the color of the horse's hat? It's not that. It's not regurgitation of, it's you have to think and you have to say, wow, the horse wore the red hat because maybe the master had the red hat, that kind of a compare and contrast. And they have to develop their own thinking as to why, what are the reasons. It goes down deeper, and I could do a whole show on Common Core. I mean,
Right.
It's just, a total whole show on Common Core. But it's just getting deeper into the curriculum. It's just more hands-on, more diverse kind of thinking, more in deeper trenched education. That's what Common Core is. It's more basics, but it's deeper than the basics.
And I think that's important because you look at how many people today that are in the workforce, they only have one way of looking at a solution instead of like, well, there's dozens of solutions. You just have to think about them.
No, exactly. And that's the whole thing. And that's why I keep telling parents it's so important for you to understand the world that we're living in, give your child lifelong skills that will help them when they're adults. And there's a plenitude of lifelong skills. Some schools teach them, some don't. Parents have to be on top of what their children are being taught because it gets back to what we were talking about earlier. Whatever happens to you as you're going through school will, either make or break you as an adult.
Right. So how can an adult today begin to really comprehend Common Core? So this way there's that engagement with their children so they can actually help them figure out how to do things instead of looking like, yeah, I have no clue, I'm out of here.
Well, the math is something that is different. So if you don't know how to do it, you can go online. There's videos, there's YouTubes. It depends on the district that you're in. Sometimes, the books are online and they have teaching videos that you can watch. And listen to your child. Sit down and see if your child can teach you. That's really important. And that's a great way for your child to learn. But the math is done in a different way. It's basically a step-by-step system of, hey, tell me step-by-step how you got to the answer. I want to know. And it's a step-by-step system. When it comes to reading and language arts, you have to expose your children to all kinds of rich materials. We have biographies. It's not just a little fluff and go thing. It's kind of today. But just involve your child with reading materials, the classics, and ask questions that are going to allow your child to think, to creatively think. This is what I can tell parents to help them do. Take them to museums. Take them on a virtual tour. A lot of our great museums have virtual tours online. You don't have to travel to New York to go to MoMA. You can go to MoMA online and have conversations with your child, expand their minds. These are things that parents can do that you don't need an education background to do it with.
You said something there which I think people might not even thought of, and that's having their child teach them, because what better way to comprehend it than if you have to explain it to somebody else?
Exactly. And I've had conversations with parents that, say, well, my child they keep telling me that this is not the way to do it. And I said, your child is right. You need to listen to your child. And that way, when the child teaches the parent, it reinforces those skills in the child. It also gives them a great self-confidence to that child saying, hey, I'm teaching my mom or dad how to do this. Isn't that cool?
Right. Oh, definitely. And you think about how many applications, if they're building that confidence at an early age, for them to build to, let's say, do public speaking later on, or if they're leading people, the foundation started, back when they're in grade school.
It's so important, and parents don't realize how important it is to set up that foundation. We're living in a world today that when your child applies to college, there's a lot of other kids applying too. It's a very competitive world. When they go out there and start looking for their first job, again, there's a ton of competition. So what's going to set your child apart from everybody else? The lifelong skills that they have, the public speaking skills, the financial savviness that they might have, thinking on their feet, the critical thinking, the creativity. These are all things that we need to get our children involved at a very early age, and who better to help them than our parents?
Exactly. It sounds like, when you put it all together, that regardless of where somebody is at, there's an ample amount of resources available. It's just parents have to take the initiative to discover what they are.
No, exactly. Or they can hire me as a coach and I'll help them, because that's why a lot of them hire me, because they don't have the time. But you could just sit for a minute and just Google. You can take virtual field trips all over the world and have great conversations with your child. You don't need to have money to have rich experiences. Of course, it's nice to be there in the Louvre, but you can also see the Louvre online. You don't have to go to Paris.
Right. And that's the beauty of the world we live in, is you can experience those things. You think about in the past, if you didn't have access to the books with the images that were from the Louvre, you'd never experience it. But now you can do it all online. And why not?
You can do it online, and our world is going to a different place with live streaming.
Right.
How many times have I gone on a live stream and I've seen someone that's in a conference, is in a museum, is in an exposition, and you're right there in real time experiencing what that person who's there experiencing because of live stream. And that's another great educational tool. But again, parents, I really believe that you have to sit with your children to do it. You can't just let them loose on social media, because it could be very dangerous.
Oh, yes. Gone are the days where you had 3 channels to choose from, so your parents pretty much knew what you're going to be watching.
And the TV was in the living room, and everybody saw what you were up to. So that's another tip for parents. Make sure that the media is not in the bedrooms, but maybe in a common area of the house, so that everybody has a bird's eye of what your child is up to, and they could just look over their shoulder without being oppressive, because we have to give our children autonomy and responsibility. But it's, you have to keep a watchful eye.
Right, you have to do that. It's one of the most important things is to let kids to discover things on their own, but then to make sure that it's happening in a safe manner, so that they're going, hey, what's this site? Like, oh yeah, you're not supposed to be looking at that.
No, exactly. I have a friend of mine whose son is 6, and he just started his own social media channel on YouTube, because he likes to put together projects, and it's really cool. And there's so much out there that we can teach our children that in the future can be a benefit for them as they're going out there and getting their first jobs.
Right, definitely. Let's build those foundations in place, because it's going to benefit them for the long term instead of something as short term. And now, you mentioned this, if you have a friend with a 6-year-old, what are your thoughts? Because there's some parents out there that they want to restrict their kids from doing anything online, versus you have those that they just let them have that free reign to do almost whatever you want. What do you think that parents should be doing so their kids are educated properly on how to use social media so they're not behind the power curve when they're using it in school?
Aaron, that's a really great question, because it's important to expose them, but also you have to have a gauge. I respect parents that say, okay, no TV, no social media. But here's the thing, you have to have those conversations with your child, because what if your child goes to their best friend's house and their parent is one of the ones that says, hey, here's the iPhone, go have fun. See you in an hour. And they go on there and they're on their social media and they're playing their games. So you have to have a gauge as to what your other kids' friends are doing. So when they go to their house, but also you have to have a conversation. Because, for instance, in school, a lot of times we use not social media per se, but our kids go online to do research. They're exposed. Right now, they have to use the computer. A lot of testing is done online today. So it's important for our kids to be savvy with a computer and to know the keyboard. If I can give anybody one tip today is teach your children how to type on the keyboard, because that totally will help them when they're taking all of their assessments online. Just about every school district is going online with their assessments. So that's really important. But getting back to social media, have a conversation with your child. I don't believe that it's an individual, and I respect individual preferences, but have a conversation and also be aware, because you might not be aware that your child's already on social media, and you'd be surprised how young they already have their own little Facebook pages or Instagram pages. So you have to be aware and you have to have that conversation. But at the end of the day, I would say to parents, balance is important, and know your children's friends and what they're also up to.
Right. I think that's so critical at the end of the day, because you can't just deny that, oh, well, I don't want you doing that, because you said it yourself. If they're going to someone's friend's house and they go over to someone else's friend's house, then you don't know what they're going to be exposed to. So unless you educate them properly about how to use it, they're just going to start interpreting things in their own fashion.
No, you're right. How to use it, and just to be safe online. That's extremely important, to be safe online. Never give their name, phone, or address to anyone online, because you have to teach your kid that safety. And also just to be careful. There's a lot of predators out there in online that they could be dangerous. So I tell parents, you know what, when you go on social media, do it with your child, and be a role model. Be a role model for your child.
Right. Why not? What better way to teach them about how to act appropriately online than for them to watch you do it?
Exactly.
As I jokingly like to say to my friends, showing people how to use social media, never put anything online that you would probably get smacked in the back of the head by your grandparent.
No, you're absolutely right. Never put anything online that you wouldn't want your grandparents to see. You're absolutely right. And I'll take it even a step further. Today, before your child gets that first job, that company, that employer, or even the college admissions are doing background checks on kids. They're looking at their social media, their Facebook pages, and they're saying, wow, especially if you go into careers that, you need certain licenses, you have to pass the bar. They do an extensive background check on you. So you have to be very careful what you post. And the other thing is, it's up there forever. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to take it off. It's up there forever.
Right. And that's the thing I think people forget about. They might look at, oh, this is fun, blah, blah, blah. But what they might consider fun, an employer might look at and go, that's not our culture, so no thanks.
No, it's true. And when you're in high school and you're out there and you don't think, because you're invincible and you're having such a great time, and maybe you're doing something that's totally inappropriate, then when you hit 35 or 40 and you have 2 kids, you wouldn't want your kids to see that.
Oh, yes. Sometimes I look back and I think, I'm so glad there wasn't social media back then. Not that I did anything kind of crazy, but it's like, I wouldn't remember, do you remember this? I forgot until you reminded me. Thanks so much.
No, it's true. It was a different world entirely. But think of the opportunities that everyone has today to expand who they are online, with their brand, with their vision. Think of the educational opportunities that our children have. by going online and just seeing the world from their dinner table. You could basically go on any virtual field trip in any museum, just see anything. Go on Periscope and see what's happening all over the world in an instant. Things that we never got to do. So it's a great place to be at. I mean, we're here, we're living in this time, but we have to be very careful and very judicious with how we go online, especially with our children.
Right, exactly. So as we begin wrapping things up here, what's one thing you recommend that parents do today so that way they can improve the outcome of the education for their child?
You have to be very aware of if your kid is really learning. And what I mean by that, ask them questions, listen to them, look at what they're doing in school, because you don't want them to be behind. It's important. Just because your kids are getting straight A's doesn't mean that they're not learning. So keep a watchful eye. It's very important.
Right. And you said something there which I think is important for people to know, that there's a difference between learning it and memorizing. You look at how many people will just memorize things to take a test, but they've never truly learned anything. You're
absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why Common Core is here. Because it's not about memorizing. It's about engaging your child in learning and asking them questions that are going to get your child to think. Not questions that, like I said before, what color was the hat that the man was wearing? But questions that really engage them in learning. Critical thinking is really important, and that's one thing I can leave with parents today is ask your child questions that are going to critically get them to think.
Oh, definitely. Well, I want to thank you for coming onto the Big Movement podcast today and sharing your wealth of wisdom. How can people learn more about the coaching and the wealth of wisdom that you have to help them with their children and their education?
Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm so happy to be here and sharing my message. I have a Busy Moms Club, and you can get it on Facebook. It's Busy Mom Smart Kids Club, so I encourage everyone to join. I also have a page called busymomsmartkids.com. You can join my website there. You can reach out to me there as well. And I can throw up a link and maybe some free stuff for the viewers today if you just let me know how to do that. I'd love to do that. I'd love to give them.
Sure, definitely. Just the link for that will be in the notes for this, so you can just go to this post that'll be on my website, and you can be able to check out all these great resources.
Great. I'd love to give them a homework help, kind of like a little mini course on homework help for the parents that are listening to us today. My gift to you guys.
Oh, excellent. Awesome. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, Byron, thank you so much for having me, and never forget to never stop learning.
Oh, definitely.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.